The motorcycles came up the road at dawn, engines screaming, spaced far apart so no single drone could catch two at once. That was the plan. Outrun the FPVs. Reach the tree line before the crews in the dugout could react. One rider made it almost to the near field before the first quadcopter dropped out of the gray sky behind him. He never heard it. The men who sent that column believed speed was armor. Near Kostiantynivka, 4 Ukrainian drone crews had been waiting on that exact road for days. And they had already decided where the column would die. Hold that image because the road matters more than the riders. We will come back to why the Russian commander bet everything on speed and why that bet was already lost before the first engine turned over. This is the fortress belt of Donetsk Oblast, the ring of towns west of Bakhmut that Ukraine has fortified for more than a decade. Kostiantynivka sits at its center, a rail and road hub that anchors the whole defensive line running down toward Pokrovsk. If you have followed this front, you know the names. Toretsk to the southeast, Ivanopilia in the fields between. The rail line that threads through the gray zone like a seam. In the spring of 2026, all of it was under pressure at once. According to Ukrainian open-source reporting dated the 26th of March, Russian forces near Kostiantynivka did not send one attack that morning. They sent 4 separate thrusts, each aimed at a different weak point, each time to pull Ukrainian attention in a different direction. The motorcycle column was only one of them. That detail is the whole story, so hold on to it. This was not a lone dash up a road. It was a coordinated push designed to overload the defenders, and the motorcycles were the fast blade meant to slip through while everyone else was busy. To understand why Russia was reduced to sending men up a road on 2 wheels, you have to understand what happened to their vehicles. For 2 years, the standard Russian assault opened with armor. Tanks first, infantry fighting vehicles behind, dismounts spilling out at the objective. That doctrine assumed the attacker could reach the objective. By early 2026, on this stretch of front, that assumption had collapsed. Ukrainian FPV drones and munition-drop quadcopters had turned the last few kilometers before the line into a graveyard for tracked vehicles. A T-72 or a BMP crossing open ground near Kostiantynivka had a survival window measured in minutes. Russian commanders knew it. Their own millbloggers had been writing about it for months, so the tactics changed. If the armor could not survive the approach, then the approach itself had to change. Smaller, faster, dispersed. A single motorcycle presents almost no thermal signature, costs a few $100s, and can move at highway speed down a farm road. Send a dozen of them spread out, and the theory goes that a drone crew can only catch 1 or 2 before the rest are through. It is a grim arithmetic. It treats the riders as consumable, betting that enough of them arrive to matter. This is the doctrine Russia has been leaning on across the Donetsk front as its tank and infantry vehicle losses mount. The motorcycle is not a breakthrough weapon. It is an admission that the vehicles are gone. On the Ukrainian side of that road, the defense was not one unit, but a knitted-together stack of them. The reporting names the reconnaissance and strike work to the Unmanned Systems Battalion Spalak, to a crew group known as Kurt and Company, and to the 3rd Battalion element that goes by the call sign RV. They were working alongside the 28th Mechanized Brigade and its 1st Mechanized Battalion, with SSU and National Guard elements holding pieces of the sector. That is the reality of this war now. The drone crews are the eyes and the first blow. The mechanized infantry hold the ground the drones make impossible to cross. Here is what a viewer needs to picture. A drone crew on this front is not a man with a hobby quadcopter. It is a team. 1 pilot flying, 1 navigator or spotter reading the feed, 1 on the munitions and the antenna, often a 4th managing the reconnaissance bird that stays high and watches. They live in a dugout with a generator and a screen and a shelf of drones armed and ready. Above them, a reconnaissance quadcopter loiters, feeding video down to the pilots. When something moves in the gray zone, they see it before it sees them. That is the setup, now the days before. Long before the motorcycles moved, the ground told the crews something was coming. This is the part of drone war nobody puts in a highlight reel, the waiting. For days, the reconnaissance birds over the sector had been building a picture. Engines idling behind a tree line where no engine should be. Fresh track marks in mud that had been undisturbed the week before. The particular pattern of a unit staging for an assault. None of it is dramatic on a screen. It is a smudge of heat. A line of disturbed earth. A truck that parks and does not leave. But to a crew that has watched the same square of ground for weeks, A smudge that was not there yesterday is a warning. We should be honest about what is confirmed and what is reconstruction here. The dawn quiet, the idling engines behind the tree line, the specific texture of that morning, those are the natural rhythm of this kind of reconnaissance-to-strike work on this front, not a beat-by-beat transcript. What the reporting confirms is the shape of the fight. 4 thrusts. Named units, drones as the weapon, and a Russian force stopped short of the line. The atmosphere is how these fights actually feel. The facts are the skeleton underneath. Consider the Russian plan on its own terms because it was not stupid. It was desperate, but it was not stupid. The commander who designed the 4-pronged push understood that Ukrainian drone crews are a finite resource. Each crew can only watch so much sky, fly so many sorties, engage so many targets in a given window before drones run low and batteries need swapping. So the plan was built to spend that resource everywhere at once. 2 tanks pushing out of the Toretsk direction as a decoy, loud and visible, designed to pull drones toward the noise. An infantry group working forward near Ivanopilya. A special forces team in ghillie suits moving quietly along the rail line, betting that camouflage and patience would slip them past the cameras. And the motorcycles, the fast element, timed to race up the road while every Ukrainian crew was fixed on one of the other 3. On paper, it is a real plan. It attacks the defender's attention, not just his line. If it works, one of the 4 thrusts finds a gap, and a gap on this front is how a town falls. The commander was betting that 4 problems arriving at once would be 1 problem too many. He was wrong about one thing. He assumed the crews would have to choose. The Ukrainian answer to the attention problem was built long before that morning, and it is the reason the whole Russian design failed. Sectors like this are watched in layers. A reconnaissance drone holds high and wide, seeing the whole approach, not one road. Strike crews are positioned so their coverage overlaps. When one thrust appears, the crew nearest to it engages while the reconnaissance feed keeps eyes on the other axes. Nobody has to look away from the motorcycles to deal with the tanks, because a different crew has the tanks. The plan that was supposed to overload the defense instead handed the defense 4 clearly separated targets, each moving into a zone that was already ranged and already covered. That is the micro-final of this stretch, and it is the hinge the whole engagement turns on. The Russian commander built his assault to make the drones choose. The drones never had to choose. What he read as speed and dispersal, the crews read as 4 things to watch instead of 1. The moment the first engine turned over behind the tree line, the column was not racing toward a gap. It was racing toward a decision that had already been made about where it would stop. Now, the morning itself. The decoy tanks moved first out of the Toretsk direction, exactly as loud and visible as decoys are supposed to be. 2 tanks pushing forward across open ground. Engines and dust announcing them for kilometers. To an inexperienced defender, they are the emergency, the thing you must stop right now. To the crews watching this sector, they were the tell. Tanks that want to be seen are almost always covering something that does not. The reconnaissance feed stayed wide. The tanks were logged, ranged, and handed to the crew responsible for that axis, and the rest of the layered coverage kept scanning. Near Ivanopilya, the infantry group started forward through the fields, moving in the short rushes that dismounted infantry use when they know drones are up. A few men, then cover, then a few more. It is careful, disciplined movement, and against artillery alone it works. Against a reconnaissance bird holding high and patient, it only slows the inevitable. Each rush was a few more meters of ground and a few more seconds of exposure, and the feed watched all of it. Along the rail line, the Special Forces team in ghillie suits was doing the hardest thing of the 4, moving slow, trusting the camouflage. Ghillie suits break up a human outline beautifully against vegetation, and against a casual glance they work. The problem is that a reconnaissance drone does not glance, it stares. It holds the same frame for minutes, and it notices the thing that moves when the wind is not moving it. Patience against patience, and the drone has more of it and no need to breathe. And on the road, the motorcycles committed. This is the moment the whole Russian plan was built around, so watch it closely. The riders came up the road spaced far apart, engines wide open, each one a small fast dot on the feed. The dispersal was deliberate. Keep the gaps wide enough, and no single drone can catch 2 riders in one pass. Move fast enough and you cross the ranged ground before a crew can launch, close, and dive. It is a race, and the riders were told they could win it. Speed as armor. Distance as protection. Get to the tree line and become infantry again, harder to find, harder to hit. The problem with treating speed as armor is that a drone does not have to outrun anything. It only has to be in the right piece of sky when the rider arrives, and the crews already knew which piece of sky that was. They had watched this road for days. They knew where it narrowed, where the shoulders fell away, where a rider had to slow, where a fast bike had exactly one line to take. The motorcycles were not racing towards safety. They were racing toward a stretch of road that 4 crews had already turned into a killing ground on paper, waiting only for something to fill it. The first quadcopter came in behind the lead rider, low and from the rear, the hardest angle for a man on a bike to check. He was leaning into his speed, eyes forward, engine drowning every other sound. He never heard it. The drone closed the last dozen meters in under a second and the road took him. The bike went down and slid. The rider did not get up. Behind him, the dispersal that was supposed to be protection became a problem the riders could not solve. Spread out, they could not support each other. One man goes down and the others cannot even see it happen because the whole point was that they were too far apart to bunch. So they kept coming one at a time, into a stretch of road that had already claimed the man in front. A second drone met the second rider. Then the crews cycled to the drops, the munition-carrying quadcopters that hover and release a small charge on a target below, and the road between the bikes filled with dirt and smoke. We should be careful here about the details that get invented in stories like this. You will see versions of this fight that give you a precise head count of riders, a specific weapon slung across each back, a stopwatch time for the whole thing. Treat those with suspicion. What the reporting supports is the weapon and the outcome. FPV quadcopters and munition drop drones, a motorcycle group broken up on the approach, riders down, the column stopped before it reached the line. The exact number of riders and the exact minutes are not confirmed. The result is, the column did not get through. While the road was being cleared, the other 3 thrusts were failing on their own axes, and this is where the Russian commander's plan turned fully against him. The decoy tanks had done their job of being visible, and being visible near Kostiantynivka is a death sentence for armor. One of the 2 tanks was destroyed. A decoy is still a real tank with a real crew, and the crew of the destroyed vehicle paid the full price of being the loud half of someone else's plan. The second tank pulled back. The diversion had drawn exactly no drones away from the road because it never needed to. Near Ivanopilia, the infantry group's careful rushes ran out of ground. Each short movement had been logged, and when the coverage came around to that axis, the men in the open had nowhere the drones had not already ranged. The thrust stalled and then broke, the survivors pulling back the way they had come. No gap opened, no breakthrough formed. The line the whole assault was meant to crack did not crack. The Special Forces team along the rail line lasted longest because patience buys time. But patience does not buy invisibility from a camera that never blinks. The team was found. In the fighting that followed, one of the Special Forces soldiers was captured alive and others were reported killed. A captured Special Forces soldier is worth more than almost anything else that came out of that morning because he can be questioned, and a man who was briefed on a 4-pronged assault knows things. Every one of those claims, the tank, the infantry, the capture, the dead, comes from the Ukrainian side of the fight, from the reporting, and should be read as their account of it. That is the honest frame. But the shape holds across every version. 4 thrusts went in and 4 thrusts came apart. That is the micro-final of the strike phase, and it is worth saying plainly. The commander built an attack designed to make the defense choose which threat to stop. The defense stopped all 4. The decoy that was supposed to steal drones stole none. The motorcycles that were supposed to outrun the crews raced into a stretch of road the crews had already claimed. The infantry that was supposed to find a gap found ranged ground. And the one element that came closest, the Special Forces team, ended with one of its own men in Ukrainian hands. Now the accounting, because the numbers are the part of this that outlives the morning. Start with the arithmetic of the motorcycle tactic itself, because it explains why Russia keeps doing this and why it keeps failing. A motorcycle costs a few hundred to a couple of $1,000s. An FPV quadcopter costs a few hundred to a couple of $1,000s. On paper, the trade is even, one cheap machine for another. But the trade is not machine for machine. It is a trained man on the bike against a manufactured drone in the crew's hands. Ukraine can build another drone in a day. Russia cannot rebuild a man who chose to ride into a ranged field, and the men making that choice are not conscripts dragged to the front. They are contract soldiers, kontraktniki, who signed for the bonuses and the pay to fight this war on someone else's soil. Every rider on that road had made a choice about which border to cross. Look at what the morning actually cost the attacker in structural terms, not human ones. One tank destroyed and gone from the local order of battle. A motorcycle group broken up and its riders down. An infantry thrust turned back near Ivanopilia. A special forces team stripped of at least one man to interrogation and others to the field. And on the other side of the ledger, no ground taken. That is the number that matters most. 0 meters of the fortress belt changed hands. A 4-pronged assault, days of planning, 4 separate groups of men committed. And the line near Kostiantynivka sat exactly where it had sat at dawn. Remember the reconnaissance drone we started with, the one holding high over the sector for days before anything moved? That is the piece of this system Russian planners still have not solved. They can change the assault vehicle. They went from tanks to infantry fighting vehicles to buggies to motorcycles, each cheaper and smaller than the last, each an attempt to slip under the drone's notice. But the eye in the sky does not care what you ride. It cares that you moved and where and when. As long as the reconnaissance layer holds, changing the vehicle only changes how the attacker dies, not whether. The motorcycle was the newest answer to the drone problem. The drone answered it on the road. There is a broader pattern here that the Kostiantynivka fight fits into cleanly. Across the Donetsk front through the winter and into the spring of 2026, the motorcycle assault became a Russian signature, tried again and again on different stretches of line. Sometimes a few riders get through, and Russian channels celebrate the ones who reach the tree line. What those celebrations leave out is the road behind them, and the men who did not make it that far. This was not the first motorcycle push to break apart short of a Ukrainian line, and it was not the last. It is a doctrine that spends men to test whether the drones are watching, and near Kostiantynivka on that morning, the answer was yes, on 4 axes at once. The intercept picture on mornings like this tends to sound the same. Russian assault groups on this front push forward under orders that assume the drones can be outrun, and the traffic on their nets turns from movement calls to the flat, clipped requests of men who have realized they cannot. We do not have that specific radio log, and we will not invent one. What the reconnaissance feed shows is enough. Movement that starts confident and spread and ends as scattered figures on a road that did not deliver them anywhere. Weigh what the defense spent to do this, not a fortune. A layered set of drone crews, a shelf of quadcopters, munition drops, a reconnaissance bird holding high, and the mechanized infantry behind them who did not have to fire because the ground never got that far. Against that, Russia committed a tank pair, an infantry group, a special forces team, and a motorcycle column, and got nothing for it but a shorter roster. This is the exchange rate that is bleeding the Russian offensive on this front. It is not one dramatic strike. It is the daily grinding certainty that the last few kilometers before a Ukrainian line cannot be crossed cheaply, and increasingly cannot be crossed at all. Which brings us back to the road and to the bet that started all of it. The Russian commander wagered that speed was armor, that if his men moved fast enough and spread wide enough, the drones would have to let some of them through. Near Kostiantynivka, that wager met a defense that had already decided the question days earlier. From a dugout, watching a reconnaissance feed. Speed is not armor when the thing hunting you does not need to catch you, only to be waiting where you are going. The crews were waiting. The column arrived exactly where the map said it would. And the line, the fortress belt Russia has been trying to break for years, did not move a single meter. The motorcycle was supposed to be the answer to the drone. On that road, the drone was the answer to the motorcycle. Until Russia finds something the reconnaissance layer cannot see. The next column will race up the next road toward the same decision, already made, waiting in the gray sky.